The wrestling world stood still when Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar decided they weren't content watching from the sidelines anymore. Monday Night Raw became ground zero for an invasion that nobody saw coming, and what unfolded was pure bedlam that sent shockwaves through every corner of the WWE Universe. If you think you know where this is heading, think again, because what transpired next defied every prediction and shattered every expectation. Before we dive deep into this madness, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what happens next in this unfolding saga. The arena was electric with anticipation for what was supposed to be a routine episode of Raw. Fans had settled into their seats expecting the usual Monday night entertainment, but fate had other plans. The moment Roman Reigns' music hit the speakers, confusion rippled through the crowd. This wasn't his show. This wasn't his night. But there he was, the tribal chief himself, marching down that ramp with a purpose that could be felt in every corner of the building. His eyes were locked on something beyond the ring, beyond the crowd, beyond anything anyone could comprehend in that moment. Brock Lesnar emerged seconds later, and that's when reality shifted entirely. The Beast incarnate wasn't scheduled to appear. Nobody had leaked this. No insider had predicted this moment. Yet here he was, moving with that distinctive combination of calculated precision and barely contained violence that has defined his entire career. The two men who had torn each other apart countless times, who had main event the biggest shows in wrestling history, were now moving in perfect synchronization toward a singular objective. The Wargames participants were mid-segment when this invasion began. They had been building tension, throwing verbal jabs, setting up the intricate storylines that would culminate in that hellacious double cage structure. But all of that became background noise the instant Reigns and Lesnar made their presence known. The competitors in the ring stopped mid-sentence. Some instinctively backed toward the corners. Others stood their ground, fists clenched, trying to project confidence even as uncertainty flashed across their faces. Reigns grabbed a microphone, but he didn't speak immediately. He let the moment breathe. He let the tension build until it became almost unbearable. The crowd's reaction was a confused mixture of cheers, boos, and bewildered gasps. When he finally spoke, his words cut through the chaos like a knife. He made it clear that Wargames wasn't exclusive territory. He made it abundantly clear that if anyone thought they could have the biggest match of the year without acknowledging him, they were living in a fantasy world. Lesnar didn't need a microphone. His presence spoke volumes. He circled the ring like a predator sizing up prey, that unsettling smile playing across his face. Every person in that ring knew what he was capable of. Every single one of them had either faced him or watched him dismantle opponents with terrifying efficiency. His message was simpler and more direct than Reigns could ever articulate with words. He was here, and that meant everyone else's plans were about to change dramatically. The Raw roster members in the ring tried to respond, tried to assert their authority, tried to remind these intruders that this was their show and their moment. One of them stepped forward, microphone in hand, attempting to cut a promo that would save face and restore order. He barely got 3 words out before Lesnar moved with frightening speed. What followed was a symphony of destruction that reminded everyone why these two men have dominated wrestling for over a decade. Reigns and Lesnar didn't just attack. They dismantled. They systematically went through each person in that ring with a precision that suggested this wasn't spontaneous rage but carefully calculated dominance. Superman punches connected with sickening thuds. F5s sent bodies flying through the air in ways that defied physics. The ring became a war zone, and the supposed Wargames participants found themselves victims of a different kind of warfare altogether. Security rushed the ring, because that's what security does. They swarmed from every entrance, a sea of black shirts and determined faces, ready to restore order and separate the combatants. But here's the thing about Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar: security has never been an obstacle, only a minor inconvenience. They went through those security guards like a hot knife through butter. Bodies flew over the top rope. Some security members wisely chose to retreat. Others weren't given that option. Backstage officials appeared at the top of the ramp, shouting instructions that nobody could hear over the roar of the crowd. General manager types tried to assert authority they clearly didn't possess in this moment. The usual chain of command had broken down completely. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how Monday nights were supposed to unfold. Yet here it was, happening in real time, and nobody seemed capable of stopping it. The chaos spilled out of the ring and up the ramp. Reigns grabbed one of the Wargames participants and delivered a devastating spear that sent both men crashing through a piece of the stage set. The impact was tremendous. Sparks flew from damaged equipment. The structural integrity of the entire setup looked questionable. Lesnar hoisted another victim onto his shoulders and delivered an F5 onto the unforgiving steel of the ramp. The sound echoed through the arena like a gunshot. Referees tried to intervene, because that's what referees do even when it's completely futile. They might as well have been trying to stop a hurricane with their bare hands. One referee got caught in the crossfire and took a Superman punch that wasn't even meant for him. He crumpled like a discarded puppet. Another referee wisely kept his distance, occasionally making pleading gestures but smart enough to stay out of arm's reach. The announce team was losing their minds. Their usual practiced commentary devolved into genuine shock and confusion. They scrambled to make sense of what was happening, to provide context, to somehow fit this chaos into a narrative framework that viewers could understand. But sometimes wrestling transcends narrative. Sometimes it becomes pure visceral spectacle, and this was one of those times. Their voices grew hoarse from shouting over the crowd noise and the continuous sounds of impact and destruction. More roster members emerged from the back, because when something like this happens, everyone wants a piece of the action. Some came to defend their Raw territory. Others came looking for revenge for past slights. A few simply saw an opportunity to make a statement. What resulted was a massive brawl that engulfed the entire entrance area. Bodies were everywhere. Punches flew from every direction. The carefully choreographed world of professional wrestling gave way to something that felt dangerously close to legitimate chaos. Reigns found himself temporarily separated from Lesnar, surrounded by a half-dozen Raw superstars who thought they had him outnumbered. They thought wrong. He fought with the desperation of a man who knew his reputation was on the line. Superman punch after Superman punch. He grabbed one attacker and used him as a weapon against another. When they finally managed to get him down, he powered out with such force that bodies went flying in multiple directions. Lesnar was having his own private war on the other side of the stage. Someone made the mistake of trying to apply a submission hold. Lesnar simply stood up with the person still attached and delivered a running power slam into the LED boards that lined the stage. The boards flickered and sparked. Another attacker jumped on his back. Lesnar reached over his shoulder, grabbed the person, and launched them clear off the stage into what was probably a very uncomfortable landing on the concrete floor below. The production truck must have been in absolute panic mode. Camera operators struggled to capture every angle of the chaos. The director had to make split-second decisions about what to show and what to cut away from. This was live television, and things were spiraling beyond anyone's control. Commercial breaks weren't going to solve this problem. Timeouts weren't an option. The show had to continue, and somehow they had to capture this madness for the millions watching at home. Medical personnel rushed out with their trademark urgency, trying to attend to the wounded while simultaneously trying not to become casualties themselves. They crouched beside fallen superstars, checking for injuries, calling for stretchers, all while keeping one eye on the continuing mayhem around them. Some of the injured were helped backstage. Others refused assistance, determined to get back into the fight despite obvious pain and exhaustion. The crowd's reaction shifted from shock to excitement to concern and back to excitement again. Signs waved frantically. Chants started and died and started again. Camera phones captured every moment from dozens of angles. This would be dissected on social media for days, analyzed and reanalyzed, turned into countless GIFs and video clips. But in that moment, everyone in the arena was simply trying to process what they were witnessing. Reigns and Lesnar eventually fought their way back toward each other, cutting through opponents like they were nothing more than obstacles between them and their true objective. When they finally stood together again, backs against each other, surveying the destruction they had wrought, something shifted. A moment of acknowledgement passed between them. Not friendship, not alliance, but mutual respect between apex predators who recognized their own kind. The Wargames participants who had started this segment were nowhere to be seen. Some had retreated backstage. Others were being tended to by medical staff. Their carefully planned promo had been completely derailed. Their moment had been stolen. Their narrative had been hijacked by two men who simply decided they belonged in the conversation whether anyone else agreed or not. Law enforcement eventually arrived, because when chaos reaches a certain threshold, actual police become involved. They formed a perimeter, trying to create some semblance of order. But even they seemed uncertain about how to handle two legitimate superstars who clearly weren't done making their statement. Negotiations happened. Voices were raised. Ultimatums were issued. The police presence added a layer of realism that made everything feel even more unscripted and dangerous. Reigns finally grabbed a microphone again, breathing heavily, sweat pouring down his face. He looked directly into the camera and delivered a message that left no room for interpretation. Wargames could happen. Those participants could have their match. But they needed to understand something fundamental about the landscape they were operating in. Nothing happened in WWE without his acknowledgement. Nothing happened without consequences. And if they thought they could just ignore his existence, tonight proved otherwise. Lesnar snatched the microphone from Reigns' hand. His message was even simpler. He wasn't asking for permission. He wasn't requesting an invitation. He was declaring his intention to involve himself in whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and anyone who had a problem with that could step up right now and try to do something about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody stepped up. Nobody made a move. The message was received loud and clear. The show eventually went to commercial, but the impact of what happened would resonate for weeks. This wasn't just an angle. This wasn't just a storyline beat. This was a complete upheaval of the established order. Questions flooded social media immediately. Would this lead to Reigns and Lesnar actually competing in Wargames? Were they forming some kind of temporary alliance? What did this mean for the original participants? How would management respond? Backstage interviews after the commercial break showed the fallout. Injured superstars gave angry soundbites. Management figures tried to maintain authority while clearly scrambling to figure out their next move. The original Wargames participants who could still stand demanded justice and retribution. Everyone had something to say about what had just transpired, and none of it suggested this situation was anywhere close to resolved. The wrestling world spent the rest of the night and the following days trying to make sense of it all. Analysts broke down every moment. Former wrestlers offered their perspectives. Fans debated endlessly about what it meant and where things were headed. The invasion had accomplished exactly what it was designed to do. It made Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar the center of attention, the focal point of conversation, the undeniable main event. What happens next remains uncertain, but one thing is absolutely clear: the landscape has changed. Wargames territory was invaded, claimed, and marked by two men who refused to be sidelined or ignored. The original participants now have to deal with a complication they never anticipated. Management has to figure out how to handle superstars who clearly operate by their own rules. And fans have to wait anxiously to see how this powder keg situation eventually explodes. This is just the beginning of something much bigger. The pieces are in motion. The stakes have been raised exponentially. Everyone involved knows that what happened on Raw was just the opening salvo in a conflict that's going to get much more intense before any resolution is reached. So make sure you're subscribed, because this story is far from over and you definitely don't want to miss what comes next in this incredible saga.